Yeah, so thank you so much, Anna. So we are just going to talk a little bit today about how we can earn credit for prior learning, or you might have heard the term prior learning assessment. There's a lot of different terms, but essentially we just want to recognize the learning that you have that has maybe occurred outside of the traditional college or academic classroom environment. We know that you probably have a lot of work things that whether that's military service, technical training, things you've done through your work or volunteer experience, and we want to honor that and recognize that. Um, and so there's a lot of different ways we can do that. So hopefully we can talk through some options and maybe you can find something that's a good fit for you and maybe eliminate some of the time that you have in your degree and find some good opportunities. So as we kind of start to think about this process, I think there's a couple different ways we can approach this. What I always recommend as a first step, if you're thinking about this, is to have a really good, solid understanding of what you need to finish your degree. So as you start to think through that, what you really want to do is, if you haven't already, have that conversation with your advisor to understand what are the courses that I need to finish my degree. And with that list, you can then maybe start to look through it and start to think through from this list of the courses that I need, what of this list do I know through work experience, through military coursework, life experience? What could I demonstrate? That's key. We'll get to that in a minute. But what could I demonstrate that I know and have this maybe college level understanding of and could get credit for? So let's kind of touch on the ways that, because there's maybe a few different ways that we could give you credit for things that you might know. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to kind of talk through some of the different options. Okay. So we have this website that we will share out with you. It's gvsu.edu/prior learning. And that talks about all of the different ways that we can give you credit for the things you know. So on this site, one of the first things we always want to look at, this is kind of the easiest way, but your transfer credit, right? So if you transferred into Grand Valley from a previous institution, we looked at your credit and we evaluated it. So of course we've already done that evaluation, but that's something we can always maybe go back and look at too. And we can say, is there anything we've missed? Is there anything we want to reevaluate or relook at more in depth? We can always do appeals. We've done that with students before. If maybe you had a course that you thought, well, why didn't it transfer in or get accepted for this? Again, that's a conversation you could have with your advisor. We can always relook at courses. Or maybe you didn't send a transcript. We've talked to students before who said, oh, well, I only took a couple courses at this one school, I never sent my transcript over. We want to make sure we account for everything you've taken. So that's kind of the easiest thing. That's the low-hanging fruit. The next thing we look at is we've got some tests, some challenge exams. So there's a couple of different things within this category too. So maybe when you looked at your requirements and you looked at what you had left to take for your degree, one of the options was maybe you needed a history general education requirement. One of the categories here we've got they're CLEP exams is what they're called. So let's take a look at these. You can see there's a lot of different subject areas, everything from political science, government, to writing, math, lots of different subjects, but there's a history. So, maybe you need a history general education and you're a history buff. So you could go take that history test, get credit for it, and you would meet our history general education requirement. So there's lots of different subject areas here. You can see them all and you can see the passing score you need. And there's some interesting connections here that we can help make. We actually have connections to nonprofits that offer free study guides that will prepare you for these tests. So this is a way where, again, if you need any of these courses to complete your degree, you could take these tests, get credit for them. Another area often similar to transfer credit, but people forget about, is AP. Maybe you took an AP test in high school and you kind of forgot about it. Maybe it was a few years ago and never sent those scores over to Grand Valley. So that's another place where sometimes we could get some credit from. As we go down in through our exam options, we have an option for a math placement test and a language placement test. So again, as you look at your requirements and what you need for your degree, maybe that's a space where we can take those tests through Grand Valley, and we don't earn credit for them, but we can test out of options. And that can, again, maybe speed up your time to graduation. I'm going to come back to our portfolio option, but I'll skip down here for a minute. Military coursework. If you were in the military, we want to see those transcripts because we can get credit for that. So that's another space where we always want to see that coursework. And then if you've earned any industry credentials. So this is something we have a few that we've evaluated already. We've got some technology coursework, we've got healthcare credentials, education. And if you have some that we are not on this list, we have a form you can fill out. So maybe you've taken a project management certificate. Maybe there's some technology networking certificates. We can evaluate those and see if we are able to get credit for some of those. If none of those are good fits, those are always the places we start. And if none of those are good fits, we can then move forward and say, all right, based off of what we know you need, is there a space where maybe we want to build a portfolio to demonstrate your experience? So we can talk about that in a little bit more detail. So this can range. This is really very encompassing. So as you look through your requirements and you say, all right, nothing else really fits. There wasn't any national tests. I don't have the industry credentials. I'm not getting credit for my transfer coursework. But as I look through my list of courses that I still need, I was a manager at work for years. I supervised. I've, done lots of work. I'd really like to see if I could get credit for that. What we could do is we could start to look through all of our courses that we look through all our business courses, our management courses, and we see if anything lines up. And as we look through those course descriptions, we find, yes, we offer a management course. And that course description really looks like what you might have done. So then we dive in a little deeper and we give you a syllabus and you look at it and you say, yes, you know what, based off of what's being taught in this course, I think that really aligns with my management work that I've done. I'd like to build out a portfolio. So you say, okay, how do I get started doing that? Well, okay, yep, I've already reviewed my degree requirements. Yep, I think my experience aligns. So what we really want to do then is we go in to our website, we build out an account, and we have a video that kind of shows you what you can expect. There is a $150 valuation fee for as you do this. And so we really can say, okay, we've done the work. We've looked over the course requirements. We feel pretty confident. But the biggest thing is we want to think about, okay, am I going to get credit, right? If we know I'm paying for this, I want to be fairly confident I'm going to get credit. So those are the things we want to be thinking about. What am I going to have to submit? You're going to have to say, well, why am I saying I think I have credit for this, right? So you have a short explanation of what are my work experiences. So using this example, you might talk about, the management, the leadership experience you have. If you've supervised teams, what have you done? You submit your resume, kind of again, outline your experiences. You have an essay that kind of talks about the experiences you've had. What are your goals? What are the course learning objectives that you've maybe already fulfilled? And again, you might know that because you've seen the syllabus, you've really looked at it in detail. And then the key is you have an opportunity to have supporting documents that kind of talk about what you've done. Maybe you have some licenses. Maybe they're not licenses that where you think you could submit them for credit, but maybe you have done a couple day-long trainings. Maybe you have some work products where you can talk to how you helped revamp your works training and onboarding system. Maybe you won some awards. You have letters from supervisors, you have job descriptions. You want to think about what you've done. And we can kind of help you think through that and what might be a good fit, but you really need to demonstrate that through your work, you've learned what would otherwise be taught through this course. And that's what you really need to be thoughtful about and say, can I demonstrate that through the work that I would be uploading into this portfolio? So as you kind of think through that, again, thinking through the courses you need for your degree. We can do the work. I can do that work of kind of help matching up, as you have ideas and saying, I think these are subject areas that might work. I might be interested in management. I might be interested in healthcare. I might be interested in nonprofit. We can kind of look through course descriptions, help find you syllabus to really dig in deeper. And then you can kind of start to do that work of building out those portfolios to see if anything would line up. And we do that in conjunction with your advisors, making sure it really fits within your degree, and then digging in deeper to do that work of building out those portfolios. So that's a really broad overview of the process. I know there are probably more in-depth questions, but that kind of shows you a little bit of what that process looks like as we start to think through it. Yeah, so I would love to hear more from you guys about what you're thinking and questions and yeah, what you think makes sense moving forward.